Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome into class. Pop those videos up whenever it suits you. All right, hey, how is it going, everyone? Midpoint of summer. It's about there, team. When those fireworks start going off, like we're starting to hit the downhill side of this thing. I don't know about all you guys, but for whatever reason, here in Lexington, and including UK, we don't start until like the very end of August this year. So I don't know, is that like happening for everyone else too? What about our Kenton team? You guys starting super late? No? Sorry.
No, we're starting really late this year.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. It's just it seems like a super late year. I don't know really, I'm sure there is some super highly logical reason for it, but it is.
Well, we also don't get out till June.
Oh, really?
It's like third.
Ooh, okay, so it really just actually is later this year. Oh well, I have no idea. Global warming, we'll blame that or something. So, okay, I don't know. Who's on jury duty? I saw the chat pop up for just a second. Yeah, Kirsten, how is that going? You just on standby, or you actually, did you do a trial?
I've been lucky enough to be called almost every day. But when I get there, I often stay till like 2:30, and then they say like they settled, they took a plea, you can go home now. So I've just really sat there in that room and waited, and then got sent home. So okay. I've gotten a lot of reading done, but besides that, it's not been very exciting.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, good public service, doing your civic duty. I love it. Sorry about being called, but it is a necessary evil. But that is the reality of law, though, is that very few cases really go to trial, especially in the world of civil law. Almost everything settles, including everything in our world of public education. Like everything gets settled most of the time. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a winner and a loser, but that all usually lives behind closed doors and you don't hear about it. Just some money changes hands. Shh, we won't talk about this again. That's how a lot of things go. So you're seeing that firsthand. But thanks for your service. Happy summertime. All right. So great. Tonight, team, is student rights, and it couldn't hit at a better night for me. As you can see, I got some coffee rolling. I am on hour number, what time is it? Yeah, about 12. Started this morning about 5:30. We've got our doc students in town this week, which is great. But one of my many responsibilities is to help run our doc week. So it's been a handful all day. My eyes are really getting heavy. Luckily, student rights is so interesting that this night basically carries itself. You know, like there's so many fascinating topics that, you know, usually both students and myself find this to be really awesome. So before we talk about teacher rights, you know, soon, that's when things are not nearly as, it's all a little bit more personal when it's teacher rights. When it's student rights, we can just laugh at it all. Like, oh, silly kids. But so tonight is the laughing night, silly kids. We'll start there, and then we will go, we're gonna look at just some few cases. I mean, there is such a constant flow of student rights cases. So I pulled a few recent ones, things that have just been hitting in the last few months to give us some good context for working our way through some of the legal analysis around student rights. Then we'll move to discipline and search and seizure, because you know there's a whole nother amendment that applies to kids, the Fourth. So we want to take a look at that. Use discipline and search. Well, we're actually going to do in between those two constitutional amendments, we're going to squeeze one more constitutional amendment, the 14th Amendment and equal protection. I know you're excited, but discrimination is a huge issue. From a legal standpoint, it is a little bit tricky. I want to talk about student discrimination tonight, but actually discipline, student discipline provides a good context to talk about discrimination, so we'll look at that. But there's discrimination in so many forms. The Women's World Cup right now, for instance, winning, men losing, women getting paid less. See, we can apply that, the discrimination analysis you guys will learn tonight, you can apply in all kinds of fun scenarios, including female coaches for like girls basketball teams. Not equal. Yeah, we can have some fun. All right, off to student rights. What else do we need to do before we jump in? You guys are game? How's Lou treating you? Lou and I are on like a 3-week break right now. Not in a bad way, just in a, we're together so much that like both of us are happy to, she's been traveling and I've got this doc week, all this kind of stuff going on, and next gen's just getting ramped up again for the next year, but we're not really up and going yet. And so is Lou punishing you in school finance? No. Oh, she's not teaching it right. No, I'm just messing with you guys. Just messing with you all. You're doing your school budgets, right? Yep. Balancing some books, making some hard choices, cutting some teaching positions, are you? Who's cut a teaching position in your school budget? Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. That way, Robin. Make the hard choices. Comes with the territory. All right, great. To student rights then tonight, hey? All right, so just to get us started tonight, since we have a nice little crowd from Kenton County in the room, I gotta share the agenda. Hold on. Sharing the agenda. The National Constitution Center in Philly. My sister is there just this week, actually, so that's pretty cool. Odd coincidence. I am a fan of the Constitution. I told we had to do fun facts to introduce ourselves as faculty members this morning. So a fun fact for me is I've visited about 30 of the 50 state capitals because I'm really weird like that. Now, of course, Trisha Brown-Farino, I don't know if you've had it for class or not, has gotten all 50. So I got to keep at it until I get, of course, Hawaii, man. Looking forward to that one. Looking forward to Juneau. I did miss, I have almost all the upper Midwest except for North Dakota. That'll be a hard one to get. Sorry to North Dakota loyalists out there. Not looking forward to that one. All right, so here is the agenda in the chat. And Kenton County, we're going to start with you. Sorry, team. Since you're in the room, I mean, what the heck? Let's have some fun. You know what? Tonight is actually, I don't know what it is, but tonight is a Northern Kentucky theme in all of the cases we're going to sort of examine today. I don't know. You all push student-free speech. The kids in Northern Kentucky, I think, take it a little further, must be. All right, yep, for those just popping in, here is the agenda. And I see lots of people popping in, so good. Okay, great. So yeah, put yourself on mute, and we're just gonna take this quick look at student walkouts in Kenton County. Not gonna take a ton of time to analyze it because this is so close to home for many of you. So I don't wanna tread on anyone's domain, but I just wanna start the night with like, this is close to home. All right, let's start with Kenton County, go for it. All right, thumbs up when you're done. All right, here we go. So just starting, this is a course from a year ago, as we have been dealing with a lot of issues going on in our country. Kids there in Kenton County walking out, not going away. Like what's happening here? These kids must feel like they have rights. I don't know. What do you all, anyone want to comment on it? And Kenton County wants to be silent? That is okay with me because it's close to home. No, you're good, huh? I gotta get you guys in breakout. I always gotta remind myself, get you guys in breakout groups, get you talking, and we'll get it back in here and get the conversations going. All right, so those kids asked for the legislature to do something, protect us, protect our rights. So let's see what the legislature did. This year, the legislature tackled a First Amendment issue when it comes to kids at university, actually. So that next link there is what the legislature passed this year here in Kentucky to protect the First Amendment. Take a look. So here you have the legislature of Kentucky, just giving you a quick synopsis of it, creating and protecting free speech zones on college campuses. Those free speech zones are intended to make sure that people are allowed to voice their opinions, even if those opinions are offensive to some other individuals. And of course, you understand the current moment, the current context that we are in as a country, where there's a lot of speech going on all sides right now, and it's only going to get worse. Presidential elections just heating up. I mean, so like we're going to have ourselves a good free speech year ahead of us. And so the legislature this year wanted to take the moment and make sure that universities know that all opinions are welcome on college campuses to protect free speech zones. So there you go. The legislature has acted on free speech and provided some new free speech protections for students on college campuses, including those with really conservative views, right? Like that's part of the motivation for what's happening here. However, free speech zones, it's First Amendment in nature, right? Like it is trying to protect First Amendment rights. You can see we're going to have some fun tonight, even though you guys are not very excited yet. I got to get you guys excited. So let's get you out considering some cases. Then we'll come back and we'll start to pull apart what the heck the First Amendment means for us in schools. And the kids who are going to claim First Amendment protection, especially those middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're going to be happy to talk about the First Amendment with you and why they should be allowed to wear whatever shirt they want to wear, or say whatever they want to say on Twitter or Instagram. So we will have some fun with it. But to get you moving, I want to set this up, a little activity. I'm going to put you out into 4 groups. In those 4 groups, you can see group 1, 2, 3, 4. Put your group members over there in the middle once I've sort of randomly put you out. There are 4 pretty recent cases that most of them are from this last year that are sort of pushing on free speech boundaries right now and trying to hone in on how do we as educators want to make sense of and regulate the school context relative to the current kind of free speech trends that are in place. And these free speech trends change from time to time, right? These are some that are just sort of popular trends right now. by this time next year, there'll be some new popular trends that will be out there. So what I want you to do is right above that little group name members recent case link box is a link to a Google drawing. That Google drawing, expression flowchart. You know, I love me a flowchart. So open up that flowchart, and of course this is what comes out of the videos and readings for the night. This flowchart sort of emerges as a series of legal questions that you need to be asking yourselves, team. And so I love this flowchart. If you've had any other classes with me, I've probably used it because I love it. I love when you can boil law down so cleanly, and in this instance, you can do that into a series of questions that you all need to ask yourself. Now, as you pull that link open, you can see that the text is super small, so zoom yourself in on that. Under the view menu, you can zoom in to a couple 200% or something so you can read each of the questions, right? You guys seeing that? You're good. Now on this particular flow chart, you start at the bottom. Start at the bottom, scroll down to the bottom, see step 1. So your task is to analyze your way through these 4 cases that I've put for you into the agenda. You'll only have one of them, but when you come back, you're going to share the fact pattern and you're going to share the result that your team came to after having run that particular case, that scenario, through this flow chart. All right, you're going to work your way up this flow chart, following the arrows, right? If an arrow points you to the sides, then you stop and it'll tell you whether or not the school can regulate. If the arrow points you up the flow chart, you just keep working your way up the flow chart, asking those questions, okay? Get how it works? Yeah, it's not super complicated. It's just super fun, no doubt. All right, so off into these groups you go. And if you are in group breakout room 1, you're going to be group 1. If you're in breakout room 2, then 2, you guys get how that goes. It looks like about 4 people per group. And then as a team, you would make this decision based off of this series of legal questions, okay? First thing you gotta do is sort of consume the case, then you go into the analysis. All right, everyone good? Thumbs up? All right, off we go. Oh, no, okay. Yes.
How does being a patriot and trying to show
For you all, I just want to make sure you skip through that crazy ad that pops up and got to the actual video. Yeah, yeah, because this is a subject that, yeah, you get why there's crazy ads right now on videos that involve things related to Trump. All right, but you're to the actual CBS News story. Okay, good.
Out of it. The substitute teacher then wrote she called the office because she, quote, didn't want to continue dealing with him. According to the arrest affidavit, the student was arrested because he refused to follow multiple commands repeatedly called school leaders racist and was disruptive. They said he threatened to get the school resource officer and principal fired and to beat the teacher, an accusation he says is just not true.
I want the charges dropped, and I want the schools to be held accountable and the officer for what happened, because it shouldn't have been handled the way that it was handled.
Shakira Talbot says she and her son will now head to court on February 19th to fight these two misdemeanor charges. Reporting in Lakeland, I'm Stephanie Claytor, Spectrum Bay News 9.
Okay, good. Sounds like you've made it to the end of that video. Excellent. So there you go, a little fact pattern that gets sort of a fun First Amendment trigger. All good? The pledge case? All right, good. Have some fun with that one.
Yep, looking at this flow chart.
Okay. So one thing I noticed is like the way the news anchor spun it a little bit. He's like said that they wouldn't graduate. And it's sort of funny how he said that, because what does that mean? Does it mean that he's not going to be able to participate in graduation? Or are they going to withhold a diploma? Because we've talked about that before, where they can't withhold a diploma if they've earned all credit.
Well, it said in the article, I skimmed through it, it said that they said all students who are going to graduate are still going to graduate.
Right, that's what the superintendent said. So it's crazy how the news spins it all the time.
Yeah.
I've learned that a lot since JCPS. And the strikes.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so it's
You guys got a
definitely
little
on
bit of
campus.
You guys have a bit of an older case, but this particular issue
back here, and there were some huge
never
cars.
goes
That's
away.
what E-Locker helps big
Is
time.
that me
By
making
pushing
noise?
this button,
I'm sorry. There we go.
Yeah, it never goes away. And I think a lot of it, some of the kids want to rise. And that's what I honestly think. They're like, ooh, what can I do to get by with? And like half of them don't even know what the social studies context of it actually is. He's like, I'll support whatever, but clarify. You can't. So I always find that interesting.
So this one, sorry, there was also a racist yearbooks case. This is the Confederate flag one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We also have racist yearbooks going on this year too, by the way, but it didn't make the cut for me tonight. I'm sorry. I wanted to do a Confederate flag just because it's like a long-term challenge for us that has never, ever gone away. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, so step one, it is on campus because it's
Yep.
school parking lot, right? Okay.
Yep.
There's the conduct. Okay, is the after
What is that?
I'm sorry. Okay, I am sitting in a room and my husband is right outside the door like weed whacking.
Oh. You're fine. I just was like, what is
Oh my gosh. I'm going to let you guys talk for a second.
Not related to curriculum or anything like that.
That's true.
Right.
And where he was senior class president, it's kind of like isn't that part of being elected is you do the senior class
Right.
graduation speech? So
Yes, exactly.
I feel like there's a backstory.
Like, the principal is just salty and just decided to pull
Yeah.
that for no reason.
Yep.
I feel like there's a backstory we don't know. I bet you this kid is a pretty flamboyant kid who can lead others and draw, a lot of people around him to do things,
Right.
be influential. And the administration probably didn't really trust what he would say.
Right.
And then the whole communication was such a breakdown. They could have been extremely direct and say, I need this by this day, a whole month or 2 months ahead, and then talk to the parents if that didn't happen. Say, I'm
All right, 18 seconds. They're wrapping their thoughts up, hopefully. All right, welcome back, welcome back. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. So great. We've given you 4 pretty recent, pretty interesting scenarios, asked you to be the judge, given you some legal framework to work through. So I'm curious how you all are going to rule in a few of these cases. Now, these are actual news stories, and as several groups pointed out as I was listening in, you know, the news media may never give you the full and complete story, but there's no promises you're going to get the full and complete story in the courtroom either. And so we'll just take these stories for what they are and try to move forward. I usually try to pull from news sources on these kinds of things. You're also free to Google, YouTube for people's opinions of these cases. They're happy to share. So anyway, so 4 news sources to give us 4 little cases to work our way through. Let's start actually with group 3, Courtney, Melody, Amy, Ashley. So this is a case out of Minnesota, fairly traditional Confederate flag case. I kept it in here because it's a year or 2 old, which is a little old for me, but it is so traditional. It's so, like, we've been dealing with this case basically every year since the end of the Civil War, I would assume. So tell us a little bit about what happened and how you ruled based off of the flow chart.
So we were really torn, and obviously that's probably why this is still an issue, because as we worked our way up the flow chart, we could kind of see how the answer could be yes, and the answer could possibly be no, depending on how you look at the Confederate flag.
You don't say.
Because so like Amy was saying, is it, you know, heritage or, you know, not slavery, not, or what did she, Amy, what did you say? I liked what you said.
So back in LaRue County, they have this saying, heritage, not hate. So we were really looking at the word reasonable, and it depends on whose view, because it says, does the actor intend to communicate something a reasonable person would understand? So it just depends on the person. Because what I think is reasonable may not be reasonable to somebody else. So we got stuck on literally number 2, step 2. But
So
then
okay, but you made it through.
But then we went up and started looking for other things. And then we got stuck on number 3, step 3, because it's like what one might think is vulgar and lewd and obscene and offensive, other people might not. So, but I said maybe where it would stand is because of the policy, because we've talked a lot about the policy from the school. Because the superintendent did say that it stated in the policy. However, the policy didn't say Confederate flags weren't welcome. It said racial, like anything racial. So then again, it goes back to some think it's offensive based on race and some think it's heritage. So what do you do?
Welcome to it, school principals. Welcome to the First Amendment.
Yeah, so obviously it was private, and then so we made up to 6A, and I mean obviously if there's they made a story about it, so it is probably in some way disrupting the educational process. So we said the school can regulate, but we're really torn on it.
Yeah. So too are the courts, actually. And so how schools win a Confederate flag case, because we have such a long history of them, like there really is a long case legal history of Confederate flag cases. The way the courts rule is that they look for evidence of prior disruption. So if there was any issues of prior racial animus at the school, like if there was any sort of racially driven issues at the school, then the courts will side on the side of disruption and keep the Confederate flags out. If the school cannot show that there has not been any racial issues at the school previously, then in at least some courts have permitted the flags in. What really matters here is whether or not you can show a likelihood of disruption at your school. All right, so that is a little bit of pressure on the principal to be able to articulate a case of, we have had issues previously that lead me to believe with some level of certainty that this particular symbol is more racially related than heritage related, as you said. So it's not that there are perfect answers under the First Amendment, right? They're not perfect answers. The reason why Confederate flag cases will not go away is because we really can't decide what the heck that thing means in society. And we all know that it means different things in different places. That in some parts of Kentucky, the flag may well be heritage-based a little bit more, where other parts of Kentucky, it is a clear red flag that is meant to convey a racially tinged message. So,
and sometimes they also hide behind that heritage part. Because like I said, I grew up in LaRue County. So I know the boundaries that they would push, you know. So, and then it was a big deal back when I was in high school because, again, we would have them flying the American flag on one side of the truck and then the rebel flag on the other side of the truck. So it was a big deal.
Well, what I hope you're picking up right away is that a case like this might come at you, and where you need to be basing that decision on some type of legal analysis, not just like, I don't feel like the Confederate flag belongs in this school, or I do feel it like it belongs in this school. That's not your job as to how you feel about it. Your job is to analyze it from a legal perspective, whether or not this speech can be curtailed, right? So that's sort of how we're going to start to treat these cases the rest of the way. So,
Justin,
go ahead.
Can I ask a question? So I'm just thinking, and I teach high school, so United States history and social studies, but if in fact the curriculum of the school looks at the issue of the Confederacy, which is a terrorist organization, the Confederates, the firing of Fort Sumter was tantamount. I mean, it's like the Twin Towers, basically, in a different time zone. So people who acted against the United States government, and the reason this is still an issue is because the government did not make a decision to punish the Confederacy at the time, at the end of the war. So that's really what's created all this. And so anyway, not to get off on a tangent, but if the academic treatment of the subject in the school talks about the reasons for the Confederacy, it didn't initially theoretically begin as slavery, but absolutely it was a racist movement toward keeping slavery intact. So it's impossible not to see this as a racial issue. It's impossible. And heritage means that my family or whoever believed that this was the way it was. This is not a popular stand, but I'm just, these are factual statements. This is fact.
I'm just saying it is for you, Donna. And
yes. Well, it is. I'm a historian, and we can go there too. So I'm not just making this up. It's factual statement. Anyway, I don't want to grandstand, but anyway, so.
Correct. You are aware this is America, and
absolutely.
We could.
But I'm saying the question. I'm back to the question you said. Some people see it as racist, and some people don't. I think that's impossible to parse that out.
Yeah, but there's judges that don't, right? And the judges, for better or worse, are paid to make those decisions, and so we have cases on either side of it. And so that's why I included it, just to give you an awareness of the kind of controversy that is going to come at you. And kids are being kids, right? They are going to test the boundaries of what they can get by with, what elements of society and culture they can sort of tap into. And there may not be super serious kind of intentionality around trying to harm other kids or psychologically damage other kids. They're just playing, perhaps, in society, but their parents aren't. And so, you know, when their kid gets sent home for having the Confederate flag on the truck, like this kid in Minnesota did, I mean, you know how parents are. They are not playing around. They will bring in firepower, legal firepower, and sue you. So what's important is that you're basing your judgments in this world on some type of legal analysis. You might be wrong in your legal analysis. Okay. And you might lose a couple of these cases. Okay. But you've done your job as a principal by saying, in my judgment, this is going to be disruptive to the educational environment. The Tinker versus Des Moines case lets me ask that question as a principal. That's the question I'm supposed to be asking. Is this going to disrupt our educational environment? And you can then apply that to all these other cases. So a modern version, the MAGA hats. Any of you had the MAGA hat war at any of your schools? Yes, all right, Coleman. So the MAGA hats, you can see where that would go over well in some places and not in other places. And so group one, Kirsty, Donna, Robin, Emily, give us a sense of how that MAGA case went down and how you worked that way through the analysis.
We got all the way to the top. We got to 6A, and that's where we kind of really started having a discussion about it. We were talking about how they were saying with it, the logo, and then really what is a logo? Like, what if somebody came in wearing like a shirt with a wrapper on it? Would that be regulated? Or what if somebody came in wearing a jersey, like, and somebody had an issue with LeBron James? Like, what really is it?
So just for context, the way the school was trying to deal with the MAGA hat in this case was they had an existing policy that prohibited logos, corporate logos, kinds of things. And so the school used that as the pretext for keeping the MAGA hat out of the school, right? So like that school policy around that became a huge issue, in addition to the straight up First Amendment issue of whether or not the kid can wear this hat.
We didn't disagree that it wouldn't disrupt instruction, like the possibility of it. We said it might make some people feel unsafe, but maybe the way the school handled it wasn't the right way as far as the logo, because then you're opening the door to a whole bunch of other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any political party, obviously, and of course, politics is specifically protected as a protected class, political affiliation, as we talk about discrimination. So we have that additional context around political speech being specifically protected. And is this political speech? You know, our kids in middle school or whatever grade level it was, do they know that they're engaging in political speech? Complicated, right? So anyway, what did you decide? You made it all the way to the top, to this disruption, I'm guessing, is where you made it. Which way did you go?
We said, yes, they could regulate it.
They could regulate the hat in this instance as potentially disruptive to the educational environment. Okay. It's okay with me, but be careful with this disruptive word. Courts have specifically slapped principals' hands when they're stretching to make a disruption case, right? If all that's going to happen is a couple of kids smirk at it, that's not disruption in the court's view. Disruption in the court's view is going to be something much more that sort of stops teaching and learning from happening. That's really what they're trying to hone in on. If this actually stops instruction, that they would call disruptive. A few kids smirking, or a few, kind of dumb kids that are just being boys, whatever happening, probably not going to be disruption in the court's view. So you just got to be careful, future principals, not to get too aggressive with what's disruption But in this case, at least you're coming at it from the standpoint of, this is, I've worked my way through the analysis. You concluded it was not lewd, obscene, or vulgar. Obviously not breaking the law here. So, okay.
Sorry, one thing about it. We were talking about too, like how she said in there, she wore, like, some of her shirts might have been more causing disruption than others, like the one where she said she was the one that said build the wall. Like that one could have caused a lot more disruption than some of the other ones.
A member of the
Okay, sorry. Every time my phone rings, YouTube videos start playing on my computer, which is really weird, and I don't know why that's happening. Some kind of glitch. All right. Okay, so thanks. There's MAGA. You can see how we can sort of compare that to Confederate flag cases. Another big area that comes up a lot is kids refusing to say the pledge. So we have ourselves a pledge case from this last year. And so give us a sense of that case and how you concluded on whether or not refusing to say the pledge is protected speech.
So we worked our way up, and you know, we got to step 3. The issue of this case, the kid said some things like that the school principal, school leadership was racist, called the flag racist. And so we got caught up on number 3, you know, as soon as expression, defamatory, inflammatory, obscene, lewd, or vulgar. The fact that he wasn't standing, we said, yeah, that's not any of those. But some of the things he said afterwards, once he got into it with the substitute teacher, kind of crosses that line potentially. But then we eventually got up to the Tinker standard, the private standard, and said that in this specific case, it did disrupt. So the school could regulate, but at the same time, we also saw where, you know, a peaceful protest of him not standing, that might not disrupt the educational process as well. So we kind of fell in the middle, I guess, a little bit on the ways too, but you know, it's a tough one.
You guys are not being super decisive on these cases, but that's okay. I'm giving you fun, challenging cases right on the line. So that initial act you might have concluded was protected speech of refusing to stand for the pledge. But then how the kid reacts to what happens next is potentially things we could discipline the kid for. And in particular, when he explains why he's not standing for the pledge and using like racism at the school, are we gonna allow a kid to call a principal racist?
I mean, you know, I think that comes with the territory and leadership. I mean, heck, I've been accused of things this year that I never thought I'd be accused of. But you know, my thing is if there's substantial truth to it, you know, that's there's one thing. But then again, who's determining that truth? You know.
Yeah, probably we can disagree with that, even though our instinct, you might say might be some truth, and we want to protect kids in how they're beginning to exercise their First Amendment rights. Calling an adult in the building racist is probably not something that we're going to protect.
Yeah, no.
It's all how you present it as well. If you're seen as attacking an adult.
Oh, Ellen, you're on. I'm going to mute you, Ellen. I'm hearing the video in the back. Okay. Anyway, all right, fine. And then one last one. This one, is like, I had to let the kid win something, so I'm hoping the kid wins this one, but let's see how it goes. Unapproved graduation speech. A kid, well, you guys tell the story. You guys tell it. Ann, Jenny, Jeff, Megan, you guys tell us what happened, and then how.
So, sorry, right when I talk, trucks go by. So we went through, go back to the bottom. It's on campus. It's certainly, you know, so that goes toward censorship aspect, but it's a conduct of expression. Yes. Is the student expressing just, you know, inflammatory language? No, we did not see that in the context. We were surprised. We expected it because the principals and the superintendent were so sensitive about things. Does the student expression promote illegal activity? No. And is the expression private? No, it is school sponsored in a public context, and that's probably what got everybody all worked up, because this is a really heightened moment where you're in front of everybody, and then it's not, so it's school sponsored, so they get a chance. We felt that there's a lot of context that was not stated, so the principals were wanting some kind of timeline to get this speech from the kid. That did not happen. The student, but the principal did a poor job. The leadership did a very poor job of communicating expectations of wanting whatever they wanted. They did not communicate to the kid in a manner a timely manner, and basically took over and handed him what the kid was supposed to speak on. And that's also not his expectation and not the history of that speech over the many years and decades. So we felt like it was a different protocol, lack of communication, and our group felt that it lays at the feet of the principals and leadership of poor communication, but they certainly had the right to have some level of censorship. That's not the question. We felt that was there. But to take the whole thing and just say, hey, here's my canned speech, kid, you speak what I want you to speak, that's not in the context of what that speech usually does. There is some level of expression of freedom.
So is the kid gonna win here?
Yes.
Probably not. I mean, I would
yes, someone ruled yes. I want to hear a yes.
I said yes.
Give the kid some rights. Thanks, Jenny.
When I read this case, it was so clearly obvious to me that he was in the right that I thought I was missing something. Like, I thought it was like a trick case, that there was something that I missed. But like, just to kind of sum it up, basically the principal got salty with this kid and told him he couldn't have his diploma. And we know from something you said a few weeks ago that you cannot deprive a student of their diploma if they've completed all of their graduation requirements. And when you go down and you read the superintendent's remarks, who are clearly in favor of the students, then you know the principal's in the wrong, because the superintendent didn't even try to be politically correct and kind of mediate the situation. He flat out said the principal's wrong.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally forgot about he took away that. Yeah, that's not right.
All right, good. Kid's gonna win something here. That's great. So I'm glad that you guys went to school-sponsored expression. There is a real difference there. One of the cases I almost included instead of the Confederate flag case was another case we're having right now is yearbooks and kids displaying the racist signal in yearbooks. So this is causing schools to reprint the yearbooks without that kid's photo in it. Okay, so like that's the series of events that's leading to these new cases, which the kid is saying, I should be able to make whatever hand gesture I want to make in my school's photo. And the schools are saying, no, you can't do that. This is school-sponsored expression. The yearbook is school-sponsored expression, and we're going to raise the standard a little bit when things are school-sponsored. There's a word called imprimatur. It bears the school's imprimatur. Like, it feels like the school owns it, when it feels like the school owns it, like a yearbook, a student newspaper, like the Hazelwood case. What other things? Even the school's Facebook page right now, or various social media accounts. We're going to raise the standard there to if the school has any legitimate pedagogical reason to regulate, we're gonna let them. Interesting. I'm glad you went there with it. But even in that instance, I still think kid wins, because I'm not sure how there's a legitimate pedagogical interest in regulating the kid's senior speech when the kid's not saying anything inappropriate. Like, why even have a senior speech if you're not going to let the kid say what they want to say? It's not wrong. Okay, great. There's some fun recent cases, right?
And not too long ago, they had, like, I forgot, somebody was running for a political office. I don't remember if it was governor or mayor. I don't know. But they had some racist photos. They were wearing like a KKK dress. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember.
It was just recently. Was this the year? And they were holding the college accountable too, because they're like, well, how could they produce those yearbooks? Because the pictures were in it.
Oh, right. That was in Virginia.
That was,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Ugh. So good, fun stuff. Now, look, all 4 cases we just dealt with were hard cases, not easy stuff, right, team? But all 4 of them didn't even involve the internet. So now let's add that, because that internet exists. And so for that fun new twist on what we're trying to deal with here, we want to get into this question of off-campus speech versus on-campus speech, right? And even how we talk about this implies an era pre-internet, right? Like off-campus and on-campus implies some form of geography that the internet obviously doesn't work on geography terms. It lives everywhere and anywhere all at one time. And so our sort of legal precedent in this area involves cases happening truly off the campus, like at the local Kroger or something like that. That's the legal precedent that is now being applied to the world of internet-based speech. And where schools are being asked to draw these lines has become really difficult. And so to take a look at this, I've given you 2 different perspectives, just cruising around this afternoon for some good cases. Stumbled onto Reddit. So Reddit has this whole legal advice thread. Anyone know about this thing in advance? Oh, I didn't know about this thing either, but now I feel like I'm in love with this. What a great place for great school law questions. So teachers are on there seeking legal advice from other teachers about what to do in complicated situations. All right, so here, let's click link number 1. This is a teacher. I want you not just to read the teacher post itself at the top. Scroll down and read a couple of the teacher responses to try to help this teacher give some legal advice about what to do once a fake Instagram account has been created for that teacher. All right, so part 1 is we're going to take a look at the teacher side of this equation, getting some legal advice. Okay, I'll give you about a minute to take a look at that. You might have to click that view entire discussion bar that lives about 3 posts down. God, you gotta love Reddit, man. Reddit is deep, deep, dark places of the internet. All right, so here we got a teacher. Like this is a kid has created a Instagram account under this other teacher's name, all right? So this is a kid creating a teacher account that's a fake, right? So the kid's gonna post fake things under that teacher's account to try to pretend to try to be that teacher on Instagram, all right? Teacher seeks some advice, and you can see a lot of other teachers have different levels of advice, from simple, like ask Instagram to take it down, to punish as hard as possible. You know, like kids should never be allowed to get away with this stuff. All right, so Instagram, you know, this is a kid doing it at home in all likelihood. I mean, maybe it happened at school. We don't know, but let's just assume kid's done this thing at home. Super proud of it. Has only really told other kids about this Instagram feed, right? Like the kid is who knows? I'll show you a kid perspective in a second. Now teacher is put in this position of I have to do something about this Instagram feed, right? So whether or not this is speech, how are we going to tell what to do with this? We got to run it through our analysis, right? We always will run it through our analysis. So let's go back and look at our flow chart. Go back and look at our flow chart. Start at the bottom. All right, so you see that bottom question really does address this problem. What do we do with speech that lives off campus, that gets created at home, for instance? And that applies both to internet speech and non-internet speech too, right? Like it's just a question that we have in legal precedent. So the courts have used this fancy word nexus to try to ask the question of, is there enough of a relationship with the school that the school can get involved in this situation? Because one thing that we do not want schools to do, and you don't want to do, teachers, future principals, you do not want to be the regulators of all childhood. We do not want that from schools, and believe me, principals, you don't actually want that to be your job. But increasingly, society is asking principals and teachers and schools to be the regulators of childhood. So we need to know how to say no here. So sometimes we want to say no. So what about in this case? Like, teacher brings this to you, principal, are you going to involve yourself in this? Not all at once. If I were to ask easy questions, like there'd be no point to this class. I've got to ask hard questions.
I'll jump in here. I would probably go the route of having the teacher go through the social media site, so Instagram, and directly report it. Start there. And, you know, most of the time that's going to get taken down then. I guess it's the question of, you know, what sort of stuff is being posted on this site? Is it inappropriate material? Is it something? So here's a question I guess I have for you. You know,
turn it back on me. That's fine, Coleman.
Is this going to hurt the teacher's reputation within the community, within the school community? Because I mean, think about it. If they're in a small town community, you know, I'll take my, you know, I teach at a private school, so we're a pretty small community. You know, could this account get out there and really damage that person's credibility within our community? And then that's where I go into protection mode and want to make sure that I'm protecting my teachers.
Okay, but you got to have a good legal basis to do so. So on that question of is there a sufficient nexus to regulate? Based off of what you just said, you would say yes. There is a relationship to this non-school speech to the school that we as a school need to get ourselves involved. Okay, great, but that only answers question number one. Now we have to go up the flow chart. That doesn't actually, it doesn't end there. Now we got to work our way up. All right, so you work your way up. Is the conduct expression? Depending on what the post is, it's hard to say for sure. If it's pure nonsense, then it probably is an expression. But if it is trying to call out something about the teacher, like the teacher's a little racist or something, clearly expression. Okay, good. We go up the chain of command. Sorry, I'll get back to you, Jeff. I just want to work our way all the way up to it. Most of those we're going to skip over. Maybe it's lewd defamatory. You got to see what the posts are. Is it promoting any illegal activity? If the saying that this teacher's been smoking marijuana, sure, then okay, we're promoting illegal activity, can regulate there. You can see we got to work our way up, but then you got to get all the way up to, is it likely to disrupt the educational process?
I got a question.
Yes, you'd have to make the case that it is, right? And so Coleman shaking his head and shaking their head, like they would feel comfortable being in that position and defending that position as a principal. All of which is just to say you got to be able to do that. All right, go ahead, Jeff, and then we're going to go to the student side. There's another side to this. Go ahead.
I thought you said that this was created as the teacher.
Yeah, right. The student pretending to be a teacher.
This is fraud. I don't accept fraud. So I'm going after the aspect that this is, and I wouldn't as a principal, I would not get involved. I would go, right, you can't take my credit card and you can't take anything that's considered me. Do not act like me, do not be me. And I would take it to the, I don't know, that's why I would ask you the question. I don't know where I go legally. I would not be a principal in this context. I just would keep out of that, but I would go after the idea of that is fraudulent, take it down now. That's not me.
You as a teacher may choose to do that, right? It's slander, libel, defamation, whatever, right? But now you're suing a 14-year-old, right? And so things get her.
I didn't say sue. I just said, I don't know how you take it down or how.
How are you going after them?
I'm not going being the student. I'm not the principal. I'm not getting involved as principal. This would be me privately saying, hey, I'm not talking to the student either. I'm going and talking to the organization, allowing this to go up. It's like if my credit card was stolen and I say, that's not me. You need to give me a new credit card and get rid of that one because that's being fraudulently used. I see the same thing.
Yeah, and sometimes that works, yes. Companies are sometimes responsive to that and sometimes they are not. So anyway. All right, let's not get lost in it. Let's go to the student side.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, quick, Donna, quick.
Okay. What I was thinking about, to me, it feels like bullying, and that can be handled off campus. So if kids are bullying each other online, I'll stop there, but that's where I'm thinking about maybe it's a defensible action for the school principal to say, you're bullying a teacher. So anyway,
Yes, maybe. Yeah, I think so. I think it's okay here. I really do think it's okay, but I want to show you the other side to this equation, right? Because this is what principals have to deal with. So here is a student who has a couple years ago admitted on Reddit that they have done this thing, created a fake Instagram account, and now the police have shown up. All right, so let's hear from the kid whose principal does turn them in. So they working your way through it, however far you've made it, you probably made it to the scared shitless part. So here you have a kid who did this thing, this exact thing, right? Used the internet, created a fake Instagram account, then maybe created another one about some other kid. And principal responds with the hammer, right? Like $10,000 fine and 2 years in prison. What? probably not sending a kid to prison for a fake Instagram account. But whatever, that's how they respond. So, here's the principal's, the impact of a principal coming down hard on this kind of activity. Now, how do you feel? Same? Kids being kids? You'd still suspend this kid?
I still would suspend this kid because kids being kids can still ruin somebody's life, like big time. Because I've seen incidents where that's happened, where they've just said something before social media accounts came out, and it literally ruined his reputation as a teacher, as a husband, as a father, like everything. So yeah, I have issues with kids making up shit. So.
There you go. All right, I don't want to dwell on this side of the equation. I just want you to know it's there, right? Like there are implications for these types of decisions that you have ahead of you. Making these decisions about when does the school involve itself and when are you, because this is really going to be principal decisions. And you're basing this off of this legal analysis that you sort of see laid out in front of you, but you can see the first step in that legal analysis is a real principal judgment call. Is there a nexus to the school? I mean, courts are just really trusting your judgment here, principals. For the most part, they really are, on whether or not you think that there is substantial relationship with the school to involve yourself. Just know that those are the legal powers we've granted you. If courts disagree, they might go a different direction. But it is the kinds of legal decisions you're going to make in this First Amendment world. All right, thoughts? Any other things around First Amendment? It's so much fun, as you can see, and kids will test their boundaries. It's a constant flow of cases. It's amazing. One thing that, we'll skip that orange box. One thing that you can do for fun, now that you sort of see that series of legal questions, you know where that series of legal questions shows up all the time? In your school policy handbooks, right? So now as you look at your school's discipline policy or your student conduct policies, you can look at that now through legal eyes and see like, oh, I see why we're labeling things this way. If you go look at the Fayette County bullying policy, for instance, here in Lexington, and we maybe look at this next time in class together, the first words are all First Amendment law. Like the school has the right to limit anything that is lewd, vulgar, disruptive. It's all the buzzwords. Like we're claiming we're going to regulate all that. Do kids know all this First Amendment law? Not really. No, of course not, right? But schools are taking advantage of the legal protections that they do have to try to regulate all this behavior. And we got a fun year ahead of us, team. So we're really going to have some First Amendment fun, I think, this next year coming up, because even the presidential candidates are calling each other racist. So, like, woo! Just think how kids are going to deal with that. It'll be interesting. All right. Quick break. We'll do a little discrimination and get ourselves to search and seizure. Search and seizure is something you're going to deal with a lot. Discrimination is something that I want you to be aware of, but it's not something that necessarily you're doing a legal analysis of every given day. Like search and seizure, yeah, that's an everyday kind of problem for you. All right, let's come back at 6:50 and we'll move forward into these other topics. Good? All right, see you in a bit.
Hey, Justin, it's Donna. And we're scheduled for July 11th at 5. And I'm completing all the cover sheets and everything will be up and going. So if it's available tomorrow, is that still plenty of time? I can't hear you. Are you muted?
No, it's me. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I went to break. That is okay with me. This is Doc Week. It's pretty wild and crazy.
Okay.
I would say by Wednesday evening that's probably when I'll look at it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm proceeding, I'm preparing the cover sheet, and I've already started work on my policy paper, but I'm not prepared to turn that in. So that's still okay, just to have that as the conversation, and then, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay, but put something in there as an artifact for dimension 5 or whatever one you want to put that under. So just make sure that you're hitting those dimensions.
Gotcha. So I may choose something else as a stand-in, or now I will tell you what Lou recommended is that I do a cover sheet for the budget, but don't have the budget artifact. Did I understand that properly?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know where Lou wants to be at on that. Here's the kind of dimension.
Yeah.
The dimension is sort of speaking to principal as advocate, principal as ethical leader. You actually are super strong on things, and I think that comes across in a lot of your work, not necessarily just this policy paper.
Okay.
And so I feel like knowing your work throughout the program, like you've really shown a lot of those dimensions already. So I would be okay with using one of those papers where your passion really comes across as an advocate, like
okay.
a normal thing for you to sort of stand in for now. And then later, if you want to add the policy paper, that's fine. But for now, I would go ahead and put it because I think it's a strong suit, and I'd hate for you to miss that strong suit in your defense.
Great. Thank you very much. So select something from a previous class?
Yeah. Some paper that you might not have used, but one where you were passionately defending ESL, English language learner rights.
Gotcha.
Or something like that, because I just think that you've demonstrated that strongly. And
okay.
that has shown up. Even if it is a matter of, the one that you really felt like you needed to do is one of the other ones, right? Like, so it could be the action research project shows up under 2 dimensions. That's probably in this instance.
Understood. So then I should put that under, this is dimension 5. So I should add a piece in dimension 5 that illustrates that.
Yeah, okay. Dimension 5. But dimension 5 is sort of the policy advocacy is the part of our program where it is most clear. But that dimension is pretty broadly worded, and I think other things demonstrate your competence on that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. So I'll have everything in there by Wednesday.
Okay.
I'm working with I don't know if Carmen's talked much about the Backpack League, but that started today. So we're all excited.
I've been watching it on Twitter. Everyone's Backpack League starts soon, and then they put up like, look at all the stuff we prepared for the Backpack League. I don't even know what it is, honestly. So
it's a 4-week enrichment based on MAP scores of reading and English for student reading and math and literacy MAP scores, and kids who had sort of that magic number of need to improve were invited to come, and their parents had to opt in, and so they got to select a topic that they want to study intensively for 4 weeks. And there's no grades. It's really enrichment. It's numeracy and literacy. And the one I'm with another ESL teacher, but our kids, we only have one ESL kids, but a student. It's the Mayan adventure. So we're talking about the Mayan culture and food and having field trips. It's fun based on numeracy and literacy. So today our kids were really excited about what we've got planned. So it's just very fun for me to work with kids that age, since I work with high school kids that can be so jaded at this point. Even if they're new to the United States, they're like, yeah, we've kind of done that before. These kids were so excited about everything. So I think it's going to be a blast.
That is cool. Although it's starting to mix together test scores and backpack.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah, I know. It's very messy. It's really messy. I think it's going to get messier before it gets neater. Okay, I'll let you take a break.
Yeah, let me at least fill my coffee. And we'll
okay. Thank you.
All right.
Dr. Bathen.
Yep, Jeff.
Did you make this expression diagram?
Yeah.
Because it's so awesome. I mean, as artists and art educators, and I teach students, I want to help them understand. We get caught in the creative expression issue all the time. It doesn't have your name. Would I be able to share it and say that this came from you?
I don't care. Yep. It's not like I created this from, I mean, these are all Supreme Court questions, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And most legal scholars ask them in this order. So it's not like it is just me like putting a flow chart on what exists in the world as a analysis.
Well, it would be great if you could get your name on it. I mean, I have it as a PDF basically, but if you wanted to make that, it would be on your name, because you did make it. I would share that with my students and stuff. I've even considered how much I've learned to share that with my colleagues and stuff about, you know, there are some art teachers who go pretty strong and they censor. And then there's others that go the other extreme. And I think this could give us some clarity in our field. So.
Okay. Well, all right. I'll put my name on it, and I'll put a little Creative Commons logo on it. So
yeah.
How I feel about that. I love me some Creative Commons.
Well, I appreciate that. And then that gives me more confidence to be able to share, and that you're getting the respect you should be given. So.
It's okay. Of all the stuff I do, teaching school law is, I don't know how much respect I deserve for teaching school law. You know, the law is what it is. It doesn't require deep analysis on my part most of the time. You know, either one particular case, of course, is always an interesting thing, but teaching law at this level is just sort of giving you basics, right? Like this is not super deep, complicated analysis. So I don't know, whatever. You can do whatever you want to do. I'm going to put a Creative Commons license on it and you can just enjoy.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I mean, the class has given me enough confidence to sue my landlord. She's taken my entire deposit and has been really rude to me in every single way. And I looked up the magistrate court in West Virginia and the legal aspects of it. And she's got 60 days to get me my rent, my deposit back. I took pictures and everything, so.
Sounds good.
Not that I believe really in suing a lot of people. That's not my goal in life, but after some point you got to stand up for, you know, yourself and say, stop doing this. This is not right. So.
All right, team, jump on back. If I happen to save you enough to pay for this class, Jeff, I'll be super happy.
It will definitely do that. Unfortunately, she took that much money from me.
Oh my, ouch. Well, now I'm really rooting for you because I'd love for you to pay for this class with your savings. Man, I'd be really proud of that outcome. So go get her. All right, there you go. The image is Creative Commons by Justin Bathen, JD, PhD. Enjoy. Off to the world. All right, so guys, let's turn our attention in a pretty big way now to student discrimination. Now, discrimination law lives in a space that applies pretty equally to kids and adults. All right, so whereas the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment, there are clear distinguishing characteristics between how we're going to apply the First Amendment to adults versus kids and how we're going to apply the Fourth Amendment to adults versus kids. Clear differences. When it comes to discrimination law, largely rooted in the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, the law applies the same, okay, to both entities. Now, you know, as we are always dealing with in this class, we can't dive massively deep on any one topic because we could do an entire class of course, and how tasty would it be to just look at structural discrimination deeply in public education. Obviously, I would love that, and it would be an amazing class. Unfortunately, I can just give you the basics, okay, of how to help make decisions when things feel discriminatory in your schools. Now, discrimination, of course, as we view it in public education, frequently takes on a racial kind of lens. That is, historically been an area of struggle, and it is an area that gets more sort of scholarly attention, perhaps, than other areas. But discrimination applies actually really broadly, and it applies both to protected classes and to everything else, right? There's discrimination law can be applied to almost any type of deprivation on the part of the government, right? So anytime the government wants to take something away from you, you could potentially apply discrimination law. So tonight I want to give you a little bit of the framework of that briefly. There was a bit of that in the module. I just want to bring it back out just to show you a little bit of what should be running through your head when you're worried about these kinds of questions. A few links that came across. This type of law tends to result in really, really big cases. Obviously, Brown versus Board is chief among them, perhaps one of the Supreme Court's finest moments, but there are lots of other cases on discrimination in schooling out there. It is an ongoing challenge, and actually, you can really draw a line between discrimination that was a lot of litigation going on around discrimination in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and what translated into lawsuits around funding discrimination, funding lawsuits that have sort of emerged from the 80s, 90s to today. So this is an area where Lou's class and my class cross some, because a lot of the foundation of school funding, a lot of the lawsuits that emerged around school funding, including the Rose case here in Kentucky, really had deep roots in discrimination. Discrimination based off of poverty, discrimination based off of race, that kind of stuff did come up in Rose. So, these areas are related. It also almost caused us to go to another civil war again when the Brown case came down. The Little Rock Nine, do you know this story, the Little Rock Nine? Unfortunately, we're probably not going to dive deep on it tonight. We marched federal troops into Arkansas to let African-American kids go to North Little Rock's high school. For real. We had to actually send in the 101st Airborne to force Arkansas to let the kids go to school. And the state of Arkansas almost called up the National Guard to defend Arkansas. Can you imagine? We almost triggered a whole nother civil war over kids and discrimination in schools. So this area is super, super big, super, super hot. But when you're a principal, you're not going to feel it as much, potentially, as you're going to feel like search and seizure, because you're going to be making search and seizure decisions every single day. You are making structural discrimination decisions every single day too, but they don't get challenged in court as often. So it is what it is. All right, let's give you a bit of a background in it. And you can see these cases come up. We had transgender issues in Kentucky come up in Atherton High School in Louisville. This was about 5 years ago or so. So these cases continue to emerge. When they do, they catch a lot of headlines. But discriminatory decisions are a constant thing that you're doing as principals. Let's look at it real fast. So when you make decisions as principals, you are constantly going to be choosing to privilege one group over another group. All right, that's a constant thing that's going to be happening in schools. When those groups happen to be protected classes, the law kicks up a notch. All right, so before we deal with protected classes, let's deal with non-protected classes, right? So you see that little table, see rational basis that lives down here in the bottom? I'm gonna turn it yellow right now. No, I thought I was gonna turn it yellow. Yes, I am gonna turn it yellow, there you go. Okay, fine. So this level of discrimination law applies to every single decision that you make. Okay, you're in Lou's class. You want to allocate some funding for some new desks. And let's say you're a lover of the old-time student desks that have the desk actually attached to the chair, all right? You're like, I gotta get us some new ones of those. Now, first off, don't do that, but whatever. Let's say you are purchasing some new ones, and you choose to purchase 95% right-handed desks and 5% left-handed desks, all right? That is a discriminatory choice, is it not? Who's a left-hander in there? We got some left-handed folks in the room, anyone? Okay, great, Donna, Jenny. So what's it like living life as a left-handed person in a right-handed world? Do you feel like you're discriminated against ever?
I'm covered with bruises. I go the wrong direction all the time. So those chairs are terrible. They're horrible.
Correct.
Yeah.
They clearly are made for right-handed people,
Yeah.
and they are discriminatory against left-handers, right? And so when a school district chose to order those right-handed desks, they really didn't account for an entire class of people, left-handed folks. Okay, great. Now, are we going to, so let's say left-handed kids wanted to sue you as a school. All that the principal has to defend is that there was a rational basis to choose 95% right-handed desks and only 5% left-handed desks, all right? That standard is super, super, super low. And so almost anything can fly as a rational basis. What can't fly is truly insane things, like God told me to buy right-handed desks. Okay, not a rational basis, all right? So, but if the principal, if the superintendent, whoever was doing the purchasing came in and said, you know, I only had so much money here at the school, there are 9 right-handed kids for every 1 left-handed kid, so I just sort of guesstimated, okay, it's a rational basis, whatever. Low standard of discrimination. Clearly though, discrimination. You get that, right? I want you to fully embrace, you are making discriminatory choices as principals all the time. You're okay with that? Okay, good. I want you to be okay with that. I honestly do, because you have to embrace your job, and your job is to make hard choices. Those choices are going to have consequences. As long as you have a rational basis for most of those, you're going to be fine. In the middle is the intermediate level of scrutiny, genuine and important interest in discriminating on the basis of gender. Okay, and sometimes alienation, which on immigrant issues have turned into really big issues in this country over the last few years, as you are aware. And so immigrants and women, or men, depending on who's being discriminated against, I guess, get intermediate level scrutiny, right? So in that level of scrutiny, it lives between rational basis, where almost anything goes, and compelling interest, where you gotta have a super awesome reason. In between those two lives discrimination on the basis of immigration and gender. Ladies, how you feeling? Like, wait a second, right? Like the women's soccer national team, right? They're not getting that same level of protection that things that live at the compelling interest level live. So let's bump up and look there, right? So what does deserve more protection than issues of gender? So up there lives race-based discrimination, disability-based discrimination, language-based discrimination. Donna, there's a good one for you to lock in on. That's a protected class. Other protected classes are ethnicity, religious-based discriminations, political affiliation, that came up earlier tonight, right? Those classes are protected classes. Those protected classes get the highest level of scrutiny. You've got to have this compelling interest, and you've got to narrowly tailor that policy. All right, so that is like a super high level of scrutiny. We want to give that a color that like looks red or something like super extreme. And then intermediate will color orange because, you know, that's apparently how the color wheel works. I don't know. So those are the levels of legal tests that are applying to your different decisions. There's one really important thing that we deal with at schools that doesn't live on the compelling interest line. It doesn't live on the intermediate line. That you're discriminating on the basis of frequently, but that only has a rational basis test applied to it. What do you think I'm hinting at? Obviously, there's many things that live at the rational basis line, but one of them will surprise you.
Can you restate that?
Okay, that's fine. So when it comes to school, there are things that we protect from an era of discrimination, race-based discrimination. We quasi-protect gender-based discrimination. Okay, fine. But there's an area of schools that we think a lot about that doesn't live on any of these lines. It lives down at the bottom in the rational basis test. Poverty. We do not protect poverty in this country when it comes to discriminating on the basis of poverty. So now think about how we run schools, right? Like we know there's pretty damn clear correlations between a kid's poverty and lots of, like, whether or not they're in a gifted class or whether or not they got to take the AP exam. Like there's, you know all that's there, right? But you can see why, from a legal standpoint, schools get by with so much poverty-based discrimination because it is not a protected class in this country. Yeah, interesting, eh? Maybe not our finest moment, but it is where the law stands, all right? So when it comes to issues of poverty, you just have to have a rational basis. Other areas are in flux right now. So sexuality is an area that's in flux. Some states have chosen to make homosexuality, sexual orientation a protected class, but the federal government has not. So from a federal case, the issue of sexual orientation still lives down there at rational basis level. Wild and crazy. Anyway, what I do want you to be thinking about is the compelling interest in narrow tailoring component of this. So it's a good general guideline. As you guys are working to form policies, and you're going to do that for this class, right? You're going to be making decisions that have implications that might discriminate on against one group of kids versus another group of kids. It's always good practice just to keep in mind that compelling interest. Do we as a school, do I as a principal have a compelling interest to make this discriminatory decision? And in making this decision, am I narrowly tailoring our policy to have the lowest impact possible on the discriminated group? I'll give you an example, okay? Because I know you're like, what the heck is going on here? This is insanity. So let's say, JCPS Backpack League. Great, that's a great one. So is JCPS Backpack League available to all kids, Donna? No, it is not. Okay, we've made a discriminatory choice. We've decided that JCPS Backpack League, which is this summer enrichment program that they're running, but only for kids who have scored in a given band on MAP scores, okay? And the impact of that is probably not going to be equal across all racial groups, across all different groups, okay, whatever. So we've made a discriminatory choice here. It's good practice. I just want you to keep in mind that compelling interest test, right? Even though that is going to discriminate on the basis of poverty, there's going to be some pretty clear correlations in all likelihood between who JCPS Backpack League helps and the kid's relative level of poverty. Would you Disagree, Donna? There's probably going to be some correlation there.
I think it's a pretty, in my class alone, I only have 40 students. It feels like it's a very mixed bag.
Okay, good.
So,
that's a good.
Yeah, I can't say with any certainty, but my initial sense is that it's a pretty good spectrum of part of the community. The upper, overwhelmingly people with high income levels. There are lots of private tutorial programs that happen throughout the summer. So I'm thinking because it's a free program, that does sway to folks who appreciate that support. But that would be that's a great question. And I'm sure those statistics exist. Yeah, I might have to look into that.
You don't have to look into that. It would be
for my own edification. I'm just saying, it's an interesting.
It's a great research project, but you can find these correlations frequently.
Yes.
And so, okay, fine. Now, as you all are making decisions like that, like this summer program, who does this summer program apply to, right? These are questions, this legal test of, is there a compelling interest to privilege one group of kids over another group of kids? The answer may well be yes, right? The answer might be yes, but I want you to ask those questions. That legal test that the Supreme Court has set out is a good mental legal test to be applying to the discriminatory decisions that you guys are making on a pretty regular basis. JCPS Backpack League, whatever it is, it clearly is discriminating on the basis of intellectual ability. 100%. Like, it is designed to discriminate on the basis of intellectual ability. Is intellectual ability a protected class? No, right? So what level of scrutiny applies? The lowest level, rational basis. Does Jefferson have a rational reason to discriminate on the basis of intellectual ability? Well, JCPS would say, well, yeah, we really want to help these kids be proficient. What does proficient mean? I don't know. Some randomly assigned variable on a map test. We want those kids to be proficient, and so we want to privilege this group of kids over other groups of kids. All right, see how discrimination law works?
JCPS is also doing a lot of different programs that target a lot of different kids. For instance, I'm teaching the summer literacy boost, and of course they base that percentage off the, I think it's the lowest 20% on the MAP score or whatever. So I have that population of kids.
Yep.
So
JCPS has a great history of this, actually, Jefferson County, and they have made Supreme Court history in their policies to make discriminatory choices to privilege some kids over other kids. One of those was the Parents Involved case. So a case from Louisville and a case from Seattle got combined, called Parents Involved. It lives right up above there. You can click on that third link down under Difficult History, Eyes on the Prize. Let me highlight it. I'll make that one green because why not? Green sounds fun. Here's my highlighter. Here it is. So there's a Supreme Court case specifically about Jefferson's discriminatory choices and white kids suing Louisville, saying that I'm being discriminated against on the basis of my whiteness because I'm being forced to be bused to a school that I don't want to be bused to. And Jefferson County is using race as a discriminatory factor, and they shouldn't be doing that. That's the Parents Involved case straight up. That's the essential fact pattern. Jefferson was wanting to bus kids on the basis of race. Jefferson actually, in their policy, used the word black. They wanted to help balance the racial makeup for African-American kids using the word black in their policy. And so white kids sued them. Wound up being this particular case. Parents Involved. The Parents Involved case, remember, we're only asking 2 questions, team. We're asking 2 questions, and that's it. Is there a compelling interest, and is it narrowly tailored? Those are the 2 questions that live at the heart of discrimination law. So on the question of, was Louisville's busing plan, was there a compelling interest for Louisville's busing plan? Is there a compelling interest to bus kids around? Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that there was. Diversity is a compelling interest in America still today. Might not be forever because the Supreme Court has gotten a little bit more conservative, and Justice Kennedy was the swing vote in that case. However, Justice Kennedy found that Louisville's busing plan is absolutely not narrowly tailored, and therefore Jefferson's busing plan was struck down. He also said in that parents involved opinion, you can read it if you want, you can read his concurrence, because this is an example where literally one human, because he was a swing justice, one human made law for the United States. Justice Kennedy decided that busing as a tactic would never be narrowly tailored. So while diversity is a compelling interest, busing kids around is not narrowly tailored on the basis of race. What did Jefferson do next?
Did they base it off low income or this?
Based it off of poverty.
Yeah.
Poverty's not a protected class. We will try to balance out the poverty characteristics of various schools in Louisville. And that is the current policy as of today. It has also been sued, but it never made a Supreme Court case. Oh, such fun.
I have an interesting bus question. My alma mater in Ohio stopped busing completely in 2010 and 11. That shocked me. How can you stop busing completely? They have about 2,000 students in a graduating class.
You stop busing completely. Well, almost everyone has stopped busing completely. It's rare to have. So Jefferson has this crazy magnet program. So Louisville people, you want to know why the magnet program exists in Louisville? This is it. It is a magnet program is a way to move around kids all over the city that is not a busing program per se. It is a choice program that can help privilege some kids in that choice on the basis of poverty and serve as a way to try to balance out the characteristics. So you see a lot of that these days. You don't see a lot of straight busing plans anymore. Most of that is phased out. Courts have turned much more conservative. Post Brown v. Board, courts were all about schools being highly active in achieving diversity. But in the last 20 years, courts have turned, and now courts really hold districts back from actively trying to racially balance schools.
I guess what I mean is the fact that how is a kid supposed to get to school? These are not close by.
You're saying there's no bus?
There's no busing. They stopped busing completely.
Busing. Okay, sorry, that's not what I understood.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so I'm saying that as a poverty issue, how am I supposed to get to school? That's their legal obligation to help a kid get to school.
I'd say go read the statutes. I don't know if there's a legal obligation to help the kid get to school. There's a legal obligation that the kid go to school, but not necessarily an obligation on the district to get them there. So that's those kinds of lawsuits I see ahead, right? As some states have dramatically reduced school funding, and dramatic, like Kentucky's not felt the full impact of school funding reductions. Like go talk to Oklahoma, talk to Kansas. Like these places have really gone crazy. Those, like Oklahoma runs 4-day school weeks. Like they can only afford to open the doors 4 days a week. So those types of lawsuits I think are ahead. We're gonna have there's gonna be a lot of litigation on those kinds of questions in the near future. Anyway, okay, good. Some time on discrimination. No place, perhaps, is discrimination more in your face than when it comes to your decisions principles about disciplining kids. Yeah, like go check out the data. It's never pretty in terms of a Latino kids make up, I don't know, 5% of your overall district population, but make up 14% of your suspensions, right? Those kinds of discipline disparities exist a lot of places. You all have already felt that, right? Like as teachers, you've noticed your school district maybe making decisions differently for different racial groups when it comes to student discipline? No? Yes? Anyway, if you haven't, there probably is some kind of behind the scenes thing. So there it is in your face, right? There's data. You can go check it out. And had we more time tonight, I was going to force you all to go check it out. But I want you to be aware of those kinds of disparities. And they are blatant sometimes. The Pritchard Committee did a good job a couple years ago of showing just how blatant they are across Kentucky. You can read, this is Susan Perkins Weston, who is freaking amazing. Love her work. She is great at bringing out all this kind of data in the state. And so a couple years ago, she looked at the 2015 enrollments for African-American students and suspensions and removals, and the disparities that exist between African-American students and white students, Latino students, 2 or more races students. And so anyway, the point is there's some in-your-face discrimination potentially happening when it comes to student discipline. But as you are aware, student discipline is one of the hardest parts of the job of being a principal, right? You guys are teachers now and you're like, hey, principals, discipline these kids. Get them out of here. Suspend them. I don't know if that's your position on it or not, but you know other teachers in the building minimally probably that have that position on discipline. Like, principal's job is to send kids home. All right, that puts you principals in this really, really difficult job of trying to balance a lot of things that are on your plate, one of which is clearly discriminatory choices that are frequently happening. Makes for a hard job. All right, so with discrimination law in mind, let's start to turn our attention to discipline law, search and seizure law. Okay, so as we move into discipline law, student discipline actually from a legal standpoint involves one amendment above all others, the 14th, the same amendment that's equal protection, right? In this one amendment to the Constitution, you have a tension going on around student discipline. On the one hand, it's going to allow you to deprive kids of education when you give them notice and opportunity to be heard. And on the other hand, it's going to ask you to do that equally for all different groups of kids. All right, so the 14th Amendment's asking you to do both of those things. It's going to let you suspend a kid. It's going to let you expel a kid. And you're going to make those decisions, principals. Sorry, it's part of the job. When you're doing that, you are, remember night number 1, you are the government, except for Coleman, who's not, but everyone else is the government. You are depriving that kid of their liberty, property interest in their public education, which has value, right? When you suspend that kid, when you expel that kid, let's say you expel a kid, you set that kid back a year in school. What do you think that kid's chances are of getting that high school diploma? Oh, lovely. Thank you. Was it good fun, Amanda?
Yes.
Yeah, it was good.
Yes, it was good. And
Sorry, we're pausing for a minute. We've got the dean speaking tonight. Oh, okay. All right, see you later. Yeah, I had to miss our brand new dean is giving his first big public speech tonight. We're here with you instead. Anyway, but they did have cake. I'm excited to get some cake out of that. All right, so you're making those, you're expelling that kid. You guys are fully aware, you've been in public education long enough to know the consequences of that expulsion, right? It's gonna be hard for that kid to overcome, right?
And you know, I'm at a high school and this is something that is, it's an issue. And my school is high poverty, high suspension, etc. But it sometimes appears on the outside looking in as a teacher observing administration decisions that there's, people aren't disappointed when students get suspended in a regular pattern of being out of the school. Does that make sense to what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm, okay. I'm just trying to be broad in how I say that.
I know it is complicated, but it's the kind of topic that as principals, you can't dance around. Like, it is ultimately, you're making decisions that have long-term economic consequences. Your decision,
I'll give an example. I had a student in my class this year, and we do an accelerated program, so they are, again, discriminated against. People are handpicked. There's 40 kids that are selected, so they're, it's choice. But one student who did walk across the stage and got his diploma had been in high school for 7 years. And when I knew this kid several years, I've known him, but when you look at his record, his attendance record and his suspension record, it's clear that he was suspended so many times, and then sometimes he'd tack on his own day. So if he was going to come back on Thursday, he'd just stay out Thursday and Friday and come back on Monday. And so his suspension rate
suspended for that
is a direct correlation to his lack of ability to graduate until we literally pushed him through this program. He was one of the smartest kids in the class. That's never a surprise. A lot of kids who are get in trouble are the smartest kids in the class. So that was a direct correlation of a student who was suspended at a high rate over the course of 7 years in high school. And he was an English learner. He had other obstacles as well. But for this program, he would have just exited and not had a high school diploma. Directly related. There's just such a direct connection between his suspension rate.
Yeah. All of which is just to make the point that as school leaders, it is one of the most difficult and complex decisions that you all have to make. So it's in the context of that very difficult, complex decision that has economic consequences, right? Like, you have to know that. If you don't know that, you're not being fair to that kid. You have to know, when I'm making the decisions to do these longer term suspensions or to do expulsions, long-term economic consequences. Okay, it's in the context of that the law says that's a big deprivation, and you need to have really, really robust procedures in place to make that big deprivation. Minimally, the law always requires two things: notice and opportunity to be heard. That is substantive due process, right? That is the basic right that every American, every kid that lives on this soil, immigrant, whatever, any person in the United States has that right to notice an opportunity to be heard before the government takes something away from them, including their right to a public education. Okay? As the deprivation goes up, the amount of notice and opportunity to be heard goes up. That's why when you are going to do an expulsion, that's a huge deprivation. We have expulsion hearings. The kid can bring an attorney if they want to bring an attorney. The school board sort of serves as a mini jury that sort of listens to the case and gives a ruling on the case. It's a high level of protection. But that same level of protection applies the whole way up. It's just how much notice, how much opportunity to be heard are we granting. But any deprivation, like not letting the kid give a graduation speech or something like that, although I don't know if there's a liberty, that's a close call. But we've seen cases where you don't let the kid play football. Kid's a really good athlete. That could be a scholarship that you're taking away from that kid. That's a potentially economic deprivation. You need to provide notice and opportunity to be heard. Even if it's not a detention, it's not a suspension, it's just like, you can't play football anymore, volleyball, whatever. That requires due process. Notice, opportunity to be heard. As principals, it is absolutely your responsibility to get this right. If you don't get this right, then all of their decisions can be overturned. And so the kid could wind up back in school the next day. Now, to help you get it right, we've created a lot of paperwork. Wah, wah. Sorry. But the reason the paperwork exists around school discipline is to try to force you to get this right from a legal standpoint. So that little slip of paper that has to go home that explains what the kid did and sort of lays out the case, that's notice, right? That's trying to force you to provide notice to the kid and their family about what went wrong. And when you send that little slip of paper home, on that little slip of paper is an opportunity to be heard. It's a way to appeal a decision. So the paperwork that lives around school discipline, student discipline, is trying to force legal compliance on this question that's precipitated by the 14th Amendment of notice and opportunity to be heard. So don't skip it. If you are skipping it, you're depriving a constitutional right. If a kid brought that to court, obviously everything would be overturned. And if they happen to get any damages against the school, your school board is not going to be thrilled with you for missing that step. So it's a horrible way to say that paperwork matters here. Ugh. I'm sorry. But beyond paperwork matters, don't forget discrimination, right? So I want you to know why the paperwork exists, why we're providing notice and opportunity to be heard. And it's got to be authentic too. You know, principals, I've seen principals have like some really shady ways of doing this kind of stuff that isn't really authentically giving the kid a right to have their say. The law would ask you to give them the right to explain themselves. That's what, when opportunity to be heard, let the kid explain themselves. You may well find their explanation to be complete nonsense, but you gave them the chance. That's what the law asks you to do. Give them the chance. And then suspend them. Because you will. It's going to happen, and you might lose a little sleep over it, but it is their job. Because on the other hand, you're trying to protect the rest of the kids. It's a hard part of the job. Questions on due process? Have you guys been feeling like you know how to do this as teachers? This is something I don't know why we don't teach teachers this, because I feel like teachers are getting this wrong a lot. And you know, that's why we have the paperwork, is to try to make up for all the mistakes we're making at a teacher level. When you're sending the kid to the principal's office, you're sending them out of the class, right? That's the deprivation. When they do not have access to that instruction, that's a deprivation. When you send them to the principal's office, technically you should be providing them notice and an opportunity to be heard before you make that deprivation. So you'll have to help teach your teachers. But this is why we do the paperwork. Painful. Okay, on to search. One big last topic for tonight. Okay, you gonna stay with me? You're making it? Sorry, school law in the summertime. Okay, cover a lot of ground. On to the Fourth Amendment. So tonight we started with the First Amendment, went to the 14th Amendment. Now we are at the Fourth Amendment. Okay, so and while I'm talking a lot about amendments, you can trace school policy. When you go and look at school policy, the school policy is built to help comply with these amendments when it comes to student rights. Okay, so while I'm focusing on the big picture constitutional components here, if you go look at your school policy, and we might in a second on student cell phone searches, you'll find that that law gets built around the same language that we talk about at the constitutional level. Okay, so into search. Yeah, let's have fun with search. I have a little activity built, and we got enough time to play with an activity, and you guys haven't talked enough for a little while. I've been talking too much. I'm sorry. Let's get you guys talking. So Here's classic cell phone case, Northern Kentucky. As I promised, Northern Kentucky is our hotspot for tonight. So yes, sorry, Northern Kentucky. I'll pick on a different part of the state. I promise next time. So we have here a family who's making a passionate case around why their kid should have their cell phone. So what we have going on here is a seizure, because this is search and seizure. Why that seizure was wrong on the part of the school district. What I want you to do is, based off of this parent's plea, you're the principal, we write policy, remember that's what we do, principals. Write yourself up a little school cell phone policy. Give me a sentence or two that you can bring back to us. In fact, let me, I'll put a little chart here that allows you to add a sentence or two about a school cell phone policy. All right, so let us put you into some breakouts. I'm gonna recreate. Let's go to, I'm gonna go a little fewer participants per room, try to get a little richer conversation. So one group will have two in this grouping, Jeff and Kirsty. So write up a student cell phone search and seizure policy in a couple of sentences based off of this parent's plea. So start with the video, then go to, okay, let me try to craft a policy. All right, go for it. Are you seeing the invite, Jeff?
And it was just an absent-minded teenager. I know this, and she was in trouble.
But Sunday, her father was rushed to the hospital after having a seizure. With no other way to contact the hospital, they begged the school to return their only form of communication.
All I wanted was to know, for emergency purposes, if I could please have it back, because Once I got down here, I had no way to contact family, my children, nothing.
We spoke with the director of schools by phone. He wouldn't budge. He says rules are rules.
I just can't go through and decide if one's important enough to go against a policy that was made for me to enforce. I just don't do that. If they get taken up, they're kept for 6 weeks.
Although the phone policy is used as a rough and tough penalty for the students, this mom still says she's the one being punished.
Hey there, fellow travelers. Mark here with Walter's World, and today we're in London, in jolly old England, having a great.
People recording me, watching me eat cake. I'm sorry, guys. They're out in group. Tasty, tasty. Whoa. Gosh, amazing. Sorry, Robin and whole Northern Kentucky team. Sliding you guys. People are taking their time. Okay, here we go. Yep, sorry. Zoom just forces you back. Doesn't give you a choice. All right, so I've been reading them, and wow, I'm surprised by a couple things already. So one of the things that hopefully you were drawing on a little bit of knowledge out of that Owensboro case, right? This is the same kind of situation that emerges in that particular case, right? Around not just searching, but then seizing these cell phones. And that's what the parent is really frustrated by. It's like, wait a second, why is the school district holding on to these cell phones when I bought the dang cell phone for my kid? I mean, I'm paying money for this thing. So schools, you need to justify these seizures. So let's see what you all came up with. And then we'll take a look at how you compare that against existing policy. Look at group 4. Oh my gosh, 2 sentences, and we have 5th time. You got all the way to 5th time. What the? You have thought about this way too much. But it's a good thing. Maybe your policy briefs on cell phone searches. That would explain why you've thought about 5th level offenses.
I teach middle school.
All right, super. So a common thread that we see running throughout is how group 1, I'll use a highlighter tool to sort of highlight some of the things that are common. I'm going to highlight actually a difference here. So, oh no, wrong tool. So as group 1 starts off, students may use in class only with teacher approval and for instructional uses. Look at that little clause that throws on there. So that while the teacher approval thing, as you look across all of them, shows up often, one that shows up only some of the time is this for instructional use. Interesting that you all weren't exactly on the same page on, are we going to limit it only to instructional usage if the teacher's granted permission? So anyway, we don't have to digest it. It was an interesting thing that I noticed right away, right? Then as group 2 gets into 1st and 2nd offenses, some commonality in how you all want to deal with this. What you see is commonality amongst all of you in that 1st offense is a warning of some sort. 2nd offense though, that's super common amongst all of you is take it, seize it. All right, if you're seizing it, now we've got the 4th Amendment worried. So super curious that you all really came to the same conclusion on 2nd offenses. Anyone want to explain your 2nd offense rationale? Because it's so common.
I disagreed with that just because of, like I said, I taught in LaRue County, and we had a major instance that came down with the principals seizing phones and then taking the pictures and selling them to like porn sites and things like that. And long story short, we do what?
The adults were using the phones to go to porn sites?
The principal was selling the images and putting them in porn sites of like 14 and 16-year-old girls.
That is indeed as bad as I thought it was. So yes, okay, terrible.
But a long story short, we have 4 schools, and so it was brought down that we could not touch their phones whatsoever, that we'd automatically have to call the parents and have them picked up. So just for our safety.
Okay. And it looks like, were you a part of group 3, Amy?
Yes.
So maybe that's what sort of took group 3. You can see how group 3 toned down second offense a little bit to, we're not necessarily going to take it, but we are going to notify parents.
Correct.
Second offense happens. All right, fascinating. See these little subtle differences. Yay, so much fun. But all of you at some point, except for group 3, I think are embracing some level of seizure on the part of the school. Okay, but once you want to take that step, we are going to have to kick in the Fourth Amendment. One thing I want to do before I kick in the Fourth Amendment is just point out, like, look at step 3 now at the bottom top of the next page. You can sort of compare your instincts around this to 9.4261. That is the cell phone policy that exists across all Kentucky schools. And so each Kentucky school and almost all schools are in this policy database. A few of your schools might not be. About 80% or 90% of schools are in this policy database. You can sort of scroll down to 9.4261 and see how your school district has decided to write the cell phone policy in your own local context. All right, and if there's differences, all great stuff for policy briefs. But I love how, like, used to policy I hope you're feeling at this point, right? Is this feeling a little bit more normal to you now? Not yet? I hope so. Principals as policy leaders, you can do it. It's okay. So, all right, but I want to add now to the agenda. Oh, I made a little mess. I don't want to go through some of the stuff I had planned to go through. I just want to reinforce in a deep way in the little bit of time that we have left. The core of the 2 legal things that should be running through your mind when you are dealing with anything related to seizing a kid's cell phone, when it comes to seizing a kid's wallet, a backpack. Like, we seize a lot of things, and of course we also search a lot of things, right? There's a reason these 2 words go together, because frequently we're doing both at the same time. By taking the kid's backpack and then searching it, you're doing both a search and a seizure. Does that make sense in your head? But I want you to know there is a difference between seizures and searches, because while you may not search that kid's phone when you take it, the act of taking it is a seizure. It requires Fourth Amendment protection. So that requires you to do this reasonable suspicion test. If you can't pass the reasonable suspicion test, then you have conducted an unconstitutional search or seizure. All right, and this reasonable suspicion test, the courts in New Jersey versus TLO took pity on you, principals. They really did. Honestly, like, I feel like they took pity on you and said, oh my God, who wants to be a principal and deal with all these kids and schools and all of this stuff going on? We cannot hold them to the actual constitutional standard, which is probable cause, right? Like, if a cop comes up to you and says, hey, I need to take your cell phone, you're going to freak out, because we have really, really, really high standards for search and seizure in this country. Probable cause. It applies to every other element of society except for you, dear principals. We took pity. And we said, okay, but seriously, we can't hold principals to that standard. So let's tone it down and hold them to this reasonable suspicion standard, which asks you to always have these 2 components at any search or any seizure, right? So even if you don't search that phone, even if you don't search that backpack, the mere fact of you taking it is a seizure. Every time you do that for a kid, you gotta have a individualized suspicion that is justified at its inception. So that justified at its inception part is asking you to have specific and targeted knowledge and information that says, I think this thing is in this backpack, or I think that the kid has a illicit photo on their phone. In the case of Amy, who apparently principal sold it. Oh my God, hope that guy's in jail. So the courts are asking you to have individualized suspicion. I suspect this kid, I suspect this phone. All right? Now, next step is it's got to be reasonable in scope. Because we're going to let you, principals, do some of that searching, but it can go wrong fast. And so to help tone that down, courts put a second layer in place that says, okay, even if you have a legitimate reason to search or seize, it must be reasonable in scope. All right? That reasonable in scope part calls into question all of your instincts to seize that phone at the second offense. Right? Like, I'm a little worried how ready you all are to, like, I'm taking it away, your parents can come get it. I don't know. Is it reasonable in scope? Courts are starting to wrestle with that kind of question right now. Like, how much are we going to let schools seize these devices? Because now devices, of course, are proliferating. iPads. What else we got going on devices? Earbuds. What else are you guys taking away from kids?
Justin, we had a policy previously that the telephones were taken, but I mean, iPhones now cost $900. So when you get into that level of cost and value, that's a whole nother issue. But what we found is that you'd take a phone, the parent would have to come and pick up the phone. Our parents all do shift work. So they were working when school was open and we weren't there when they could come and get the phone. So it was this crazy loop of now the kid's phone is released, but he still can't get it because it's required for a parent to come. So it became so difficult. It was punishment upon punishment of the entire family because they often shared cars and you couldn't reach anyway. So we completely stopped taking phones from kids, and it's rare now when a telephone is taken. It's almost non-existent.
Yeah, that shift is happening right now. The courts woke up to that exact problem that Donna just laid out. They realized, oh my God, we've been seizing these cell phones for decades. There's a lot of problems with that. Decades, whatever, since we've been doing cell phones, which feels like decades, probably is only actually one, but whatever. So there's a lot of problems with that. As Donna just laid out, like, first off, it's the family's money. Who actually owns that device? You've seized an adult's device. That's not, the kid doesn't own that cell phone. The adult owns that cell phone. So now you've conducted an adult seizure. We don't apply reasonable suspicion to the adult seizure. We apply probable cause. You don't have probable cause. You're not a cop. What's going on? So that's a big part of the problem. And then this whole, like, we're just going to hold it for 2 weeks, or we're going to hold it until the parent can come get it. It's causing a lot of problems. So there's a big shift underway, all of which is to say, principals, like, you're going to be going into districts that have policies all over the place. And as all of you just articulated, except for Amy's group 3, you're ready to seize those devices. As teachers, you get rid of those damn things. Get them out of the classroom, seize those things, keep it in the office, make the parents come pick them up. Right? That's where you're normal, because that's where all your teachers are going to want you to behave too. But you have to be asking yourself, what is reasonable in scope here for this search or seizure? Is holding this cell phone for a family who can't come get it because they are doing shift work, whatever that case of that family may be, is that reasonable in scope?
I think we're also dealing in an age where, we are charged with maintaining the classroom if you're a teacher, and we're living in an age of anything could be, if a phone is out, anything could be videotaped. Bullying could be going on. Like, there's so much a big can of worms when it comes to these cell phones. So for me, the idea of a cell phone being out, that is just such a dangerous situation for a lot of people in a room, I feel like. So the more I can keep them put up, the more CYA for myself, like, I'm not saying I'm like beating my kids in my classroom, but there's so many things that can be going on with those cell phones that we're supposed to be keeping track of. Like, we're in this like bind of we've got to maintain this educational environment, but I wish they had let the cell phones in the building to begin with. You know, like, they bring their own problems.
All true, and we can't solve it tonight, right? And you guys can explore this in your policy briefs if you like. And when you're signing on to be a principal here in the next couple of years, you're signing on knowing that this is an existing problem for which there are no great answers. And it's not going to get better, team. It is not going to get better in that smart devices are proliferating. At one point, remember when Google wanted to do Google Glass? Like, I was like, this is good. I hope it works simply because I can't wait for the lawsuits. Are we going to take a kid's glasses away on a test because the kid might have Google in their glasses? I was like, yes, I know that some school's going to do that. We're going to take a kid's glasses away. And I was just sort of waiting for that case. But unfortunately, Google Glass never really manifested as much as I thought it would. Anyway, neither here nor there. This is going to continue to be a lot of fun in this area. It's going to continue to be hard questions in this area. You need to be deeply grounded in these two questions that the courts are asking you to ask. Is your seizure justified at its inception? And then once you make that search or seizure, is it reasonable in scope? And that means you have to stop yourself, principals. That second part of that question, reasonable in scope, means you have to stop yourself. If you suspect that the kid texted, do not look at the kid's photos. Do not look at the kid's email. That is not reasonable in scope. You only had suspicion for the text message. Anyway, I could dwell forever. The thing is, if you find evidence of marijuana usage, or if you find something going on in the kid's email, that entire search is now the fruit of a poisonous search. All that evidence gets thrown out. So it's pretty high stakes when you get this wrong, because the courts have this sort of all or nothing approach. Either the search was 100% right or it is all thrown out.
I feel like I remember in reading one of our court cases that
Owensboro.
The New Jersey versus TLO did the court back them up because it was already part of the school policy for them to take the phone?
No, that case was complicated. It was an interesting case, but the core of that case was that they actually did not back the school. The GC versus Owensboro, the one you all were briefing,
right?
That the court, it's an example of where the court actually said no to the school district. Now, that kid had done some other things wrong. That was a complex case, and almost always it is that. But the court in that case does draw a line and say, wait a second, you can't just be sort of holistically searching and seizing these cell phones. It sort of pulled it back. And of course, this was a big this is the first time it happened nationally. It happened in Owensboro. So it's sort of, Kentucky helping to make national law here. And so
no, I was talking about the New Jersey versus TLO. I thought that was
the original case.
Yeah, I thought because it was in policy that it got backed up. Is that, or am I wrong?
Definitely wrong.
Okay.
Courts, particularly federal courts, and definitely the Supreme Court, does not give a crap about what your policy is. They care about application of constitutional principles, right? So that's another reason why policy comes up in this case, but only after we understand the constitutional principle, because the courts do not care. If the policy's out of step with the principle, we're going to throw it out.
Okay.
And I've reached the witching hour, team, and I know it's that time. So, it's a lot of stuff with student rights. Unfortunately, class moves on. We got to move on to the next big topics around abuse. So there's another series of topics here before we get to teacher rights, but we'll leave mostly student rights behind us tonight. Okay, great fun. I'll hang out in the room if anyone has any questions. I saw lots of folks getting those legal interviews done and starting to work your way through the assignments. Good job. I'll hang out in the room if people want to talk about those anymore. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out tonight, and see you in a couple weeks. Bye, team. ahead, Krista.
Hey, thanks for putting up with my internet and everything else today. It's been kind of a nightmare.
It's okay. It happens. I'm sorry about the tires. Or what was it? Tires or?
It's my wheel bearing. So yeah, like on my MDX, I had to go up to the Acura dealership, and tomorrow's my 15-year-old. It's her birthday, and we're